Chapter 670, The Bird Was Followed by the Crow. Liao Honglei used a stratagem to get close to Jinguji Saikairo. He thought he had succeeded and was about to smash Jinguji Saikairo's head with a punch. But the Jinguji Saikairo in front of him suddenly became strange. He grabbed Liao Honglei's arm, and his body began to crack. In a short moment, he had lost his human form. His body was covered in cracks, but a heart-stopping white light was emanating from within. Explosion! A voice suddenly came from a distance. The white light surrounding Shinji Saikairo suddenly became even more intense. A loud explosion resounded across the battlefield. Even the other battlefields could hear it clearly. Due to the light, the Operations Command Center did not know what had happened. However, the powerful energy reaction here still attracted everyone's attention. Everyone nervously looked at the area glowing with white light. It was only after more than 10 seconds that they slowly regained their sight there. But the scene in front of them made Zhu Zheng's pupils contract, and he almost couldn't help the urge to run down from the command deck. Because they saw Liao Honglei's body in tatters, covered in blood, lying on the ground. The strongest combat suit on his body had been broken beyond recognition. However, in his place, the figure of Saikairo Jinguji had completely disappeared. Roar! Kanemaru and Akamaru roared as they pounced, lying on top of the seriously injured Liao Honglei and biting him cruelly and bloodily. That terrifying scene made the staff at the Operations Command Center look on with distorted faces. One female staff member couldn't bear to watch and covered her face in tears. Although they were used to seeing death and life, they had not experienced such a cruel scene before. But the person who was bitten to death by the Shikigami was the deputy team leader of the Heavenly Squad. They found it hard to accept that such a being would die in such a tragic way. In the thick fog, Jinguji Saikairo silently lit a cigarette for himself. He said dreamily, "Who told you that a yin-yang master would be so careless as to appear in the middle of a battlefield?" What had appeared in Liao Honglei's field of vision before was not Jinguji Saikairo himself. It was a puppet made by him using a large amount of explosives and talismans. From the very beginning, that was the trap he had set for Liao Honglei. Otherwise, relying solely on those few Shikigami, Jinguji Saikairo understood that there was little hope of them being able to kill the vice-captain of the Tenjin squad. Thanks to that person's intelligence, he softly mused. Otherwise, if he encountered a strong person like Liao Honglei head-on, there was a high probability that he would really die. As for the Combat Command Center, there was not a sound at this time, and no one dared to breathe. They cautiously and secretly surveyed Zhu Zheng's expression, only feeling that there seemed to be a dense black cloud looming there. Defeated on both fronts, 2 vice-captains of the Tenjin squad were killed in battle. Such a tragedy was rare, even since the establishment of the Jiangnan region. In particular, the investigation team on this mission was the Heavenly God Squad, which ranked first in the score table and had a 100% mission completion rate. Zhu Zheng's face was expressionless, but his eyes were surging with emotions. If it weren't for the presence of so many subordinates, he was afraid that he would have already exploded. Tu Yunlai said in a deep voice, "Now, we can only wait and see the results of Deng Shentong's side of the battle. As long as he can win, then we will be the winners in this battle. However, if Deng Shentong loses, the consequences will definitely be intolerable for the Jiangnan region. Because that will not only mark a complete failure of this operation. It will also allow this incident to ferment in the outside world, causing a serious blow to the prestige of the Jiangnan region." Zhu Zheng's guard Sun Lushuan pushed his glasses and looked at the image on the monitor, a doubt arising in his heart. But he glanced at Zhu Zheng and then at several senior figures from Blizzard City present. From Tu Yunlai to Lan Xincheng to Bai Li Changqing. When his gaze fell on Bai Li Changqing, Sun Lushuan's gaze lingered slightly longer before he withdrew it. It wasn't quite the right time to say something. After all, the battle hadn't completely ended yet. However, the fact that the Divine Squad had lost on several fronts smelt a little off. They had already given up hope on the battlefronts in other places, and were just hoping that Deng Shentong would be able to carry out a magnificent beheading operation. But at this time, Zhang Yi, who had not received much attention from them, had already arrived near the western front. Shinguji Saikairo slowly walked out of the mist. Kamitani Nato and Akutsu Shinichiro had almost lost their fighting power. Their internal organs had been shattered by Liao Honglei's attack. If it wasn't for their strong bodies and extraordinary vitality, they would have died on the spot. Shinguji Saikairo walked over and took out a healing potion from his body, injecting each of them with a shot. What a mess! Shinguji Saikairo sighed. Shinguji Nato had blood dripping from the corner of his mouth, and he frowned unhappily at the sound. Are you mocking us? That's not it. Shinguji Saikairo shook his head. I was just thinking that if it wasn't for that person's help, it would be really difficult for us to fight against the Jiangnan region on our own. Pish! Akutsu Shinichiro said disdainfully, no matter how powerful they are, they still lost to us, didn't they? Shinji Jinguji glanced at him and said, don't forget, the Jiangnan region has more than just the Tenjin squad. If we encounter another investigation team next time, it may not go as smoothly. Akutsu Shinichiro laughed, but for now, we have won a great victory, haven't we? He tilted his head and sighed. As expected, Miss Takeuchi's divination was correct. I have a minor lucky fortune today. Even if I get a little hurt, I will still be able to live well. Before he finished speaking, Kamiya Nato suddenly shouted, watch out! Saikairo Kamigoji's eyes narrowed, but he was the first to summon a Shikigami to protect himself. Akutsu also sensed that danger was approaching. However, at this time, it was difficult for his body to even move. Even though he sensed the danger, he was completely unable to avoid the attack. Pop! A silver bullet shot into his forehead, and then came out the back of his head. Eclipse Moon Group, Shinichiro Yakuzu, defeated. Seeing Shinichiro Yakuzu die, Kamiya Nato shouted, ambush. While shouting, he rolled to the ground. But this did not save his life. Even though he buried his head, the holy silver bullet that represented death still pierced his skull and shot directly from the top of his head into his cranial cavity. This was the power of the spatial systems. For Zhang Yi nowadays, even if he shoots with his eyes closed, the bullet will not deviate by half a centimeter. Not to mention that his target was just two seriously injured members of Eclipse Moon. Chapter 671, Frightened Off. By the time Zhang Yi arrived at the Western Front, Liao Honglei had already been killed by Shinji Shrine's plan. However, Zhang Yi keenly noticed that there were two seriously injured and dying members of Eclipse on the battlefield. Of course, he would not let go of such a good opportunity and decisively fired a supplementary shot. Shinji Shrine's ability could not intercept his bullets, so he could only watch as Zhang Yi killed his two teammates. After confirming the deaths of Akutsu and Kamiya Nato, Jinguji didn't hesitate for a second and decisively chose to retreat into the thick fog with his Shikigami protecting him. In a short while, Zhang Yi, fully armed and having activated the, slowly walked over. He was holding two white eagles in his hands and his sharp gaze swept across the battlefield. Although the thick fog was enveloping the battlefield, as a spatial alien he was very sensitive to air fluctuations. Now, as long as there was life within 500 meters, even the sound of breathing would be sensed. Soon, he sensed the people hiding in the thick fog, as well as other presences. A giant golden ape and a three-headed hellhound covered in flames burst out of the fog and pounced on Zhang Yi from the left and right. Zhang Yi calmly paid attention to the movements around him and spread his hands to the left and right. The two giant Shikigamis saw that Zhang Yi was not evading, and they all slammed towards him. Kanemaru raised his fist the size of a sand pot and roared as he slammed it down. Akamaru spat out scarlet magma, and the three giant heads let out a piercing barking sound. Puff! A mouthful of magma spewed towards Zhang Yi's head. However, the lava did not approach Zhang Yi, but instead directly disappeared into the air, being absorbed by Zhang Yi into a different space. Kanemaru's fist, however, came directly at Zhang Yi. Its power was too fierce. After the fist smashed down, its entire body was directly brought into a different space, leaving not even a ripple behind. Although Akamaru was somewhat slower, it only lagged behind for a moment, and its huge body was also absorbed by Zhang Yi into a different space. Oh, to be precise, they ran in by themselves. Deep in the thick fog, Saikiro Jinguji was scared and cold sweat was running down his forehead. Although he still didn't know who Zhang Yi was or what his abilities were, he had deployed 2 Shinigami, but they were effortlessly collected by the opponent. Obviously, the opponent's abilities were restraining him. After collecting Kanemaru and Akamaru, Zhang Yi's gaze turned to Saikiro Jinguji. The distance between the two was about 400 meters. Just right. A twisted white light began to slowly emerge from the center of his right eye, and a terrifying spatial power rapidly gathered. At this moment, Shinji Saikiro felt the crisis of death. As a stock trader, he was extremely cautious by nature. So at this moment, Shinji Saikiro did not hesitate, and turned around and ran directly towards the distance. Zhang Yi was momentarily stunned. He had never expected to find such a steady opponent. The pre-release of divine power probably took about 1 second. During this frontal release, if the opponent was on guard, it was indeed not easy to hit. Zhang Yi's eyes suddenly looked in the direction of Shinguji Saikiro's escape. He felt an unusual fluctuation, and there must be someone in that direction. However, the fog was too deep, and he knew too little about battlefield intelligence. If he rashly chased after them, he might fall into the net of encirclement laid by Eclipse Moon. He was unwilling to face several high-level combatants of Eclipse Moon at the same time. After some consideration, Zhang Yi did not chase after them into the thick fog, but instead planned to collect his spoils first. After confirming that there were no bystanders around, he quickly walked over and collected the bodies of the 2 Eclipse Moon members. After the heads were destroyed, their essences would quickly dissipate as well, but there would be no such problem if they were placed in a different space. Zhang Yi carefully collected their bodies, but his gaze was somewhat puzzled as he looked in the direction in which Shingoji Saikiro had left. He didn't understand why, after he had made his move, Shingoji Saikiro had not chosen to continue fighting with him, but had chosen to flee instead. No, it could also be retreat. Because of something else? Zhang Yi frowned slightly. It's impossible that it was because he understood my strength, is it? This was even less likely. Even in the Jiangnan region, not many people understood Zhang Yi's true strength. Shinguji Saikiro had the strength to single-handedly kill the deputy team leader of the Tenjin squad, so why would he have a fear of him and retreat? What Zhang Yi didn't know was that the other party was also a cautious person like him, and could even be called a pessimist. As soon as he discovered that Zhang Yi's abilities might restrain him, Shinguji Saikiro didn't hesitate to leave his companion's corpse behind and run. In the Combat Command Center, the news of the battle situation here was also reported to Zhu Zheng. Zhu Zheng and Tu Yunlai and the others were dumbfounded. None of them had expected that in the end, it was not the Divine Squad that had established the meritorious service, but the outsider Zhang Yi from the outer city. Only Bai Li Changqing sighed in his heart, not the least bit surprised by this outcome. It could even be said that if it weren't for Zhang Yi's being too steady, the battle scene would have been even more dazzling at this time with any radical outsider. Zhu Jing muttered, I never imagined that this Zhang Yi would have such formidable strength. If I had known, I would have reallocated the tasks. Lan Xinqing, however, said, he was just the one who killed Shinkai Nado and Shinichiro Akutsu by picking up the slack. Tu Yunlai looked at him with a gloomy expression. But he scared off Jinguji. And he completely relied on his own strength to kill the husband and wife team of Eclipse Moon. I even feel that this guy's strength is comparable to a vice-captain level character. Lan Xinqing's tone trailed off, and then he said coldly, if he really is very strong, why has he remained hidden? If he had gone to support other fronts earlier, the current battle situation might be completely different. He looked at Zhu Zheng and said, Zhu Shuai, I still feel that this person's heart is not completely loyal to Blizzard City. This remark was met with a derisive laugh from Bai Li Changqing. Pfft. The sound was too harsh in the Combat Command Center. Lan Xinqing angrily glared at Bai Li Changqing. Bai Li Changqing, what are you laughing at? Bai Li Changqing shrugged, nothing, I just don't think we can hold the outsiders in the outer cities to Blizzard City's standards, right? And among the outsiders from the outer cities this time, Zhang Yi was considered to have performed the best. Lan Xinchen really couldn't refute this point. He could only say, someone who is capable of helping their comrades in battle but deliberately reserves their strength, this kind of thing, the elite of my Blizzard City definitely would not do. Okay. Zhu Jing stopped Lan Xinchen's nonsense. At this time, he was in no mood to listen to Lan Xinchen and Bai Li Changqing bicker. The issue at hand was what concerned him the most. Lan Xinchen quickly shut up and stopped talking about it. However, soon, he thought of another solution. Since we now know that Zhang Yi has some strength, why not let him continue to fight against Eclipse Moon? In this way, it can also help the other members of the Heavenly God Squad on the field. Although he said this, the battle in the field was not going well. Moreover, Deng Shintong had already killed his way to the Eclipse Moon Group's base camp and engaged in battle with the group leader, Phoenix Hallren. That battle would determine the outcome of the operation. Zhu Jing looked at Zhang Yi in the screen and after a moment of thought, said, Zhang Yi, your mission is complete, withdraw now. Lan Xinchen was shocked by the news and said, Zhu Shuai. Zhu Jing ignored Lan Xinchen's words and silently ended the communication with Zhang Yi. Too many people had died in this battle. The next battle would be between Deng Shenfu and Feng Huang Yuanren.